I would like to introduce another Carey School alumni, Mary Peterson, and her Panther Points of Pride video.
I'm Mary Carol Carlson Peterson, and I graduated from the Carey High School in 1949. I lived, when I was quite young, in the little house they just torn down and burned just as you come up Littlewood River Road on the right-hand side. We lived there. My mom and dad had 6 kids and lived in that 2-room house. Then we moved up to the house on North Main Street, and that's where I grew up mostly. When I started to school, the grade school was in the basement of the old school building. The first, second, third, and fourth were there, and then the 5th grade was in the northeast corner upstairs, and the rest of the school, the 6th, 7th, and 8th, were in buildings out away from the main building. Professor Larkin taught the 8th grade, and Mr. Kessel-Severe taught the 6th and 7th. We had hour noons and half an hour recesses, and when we had recess and noon, Professor Larkin was a lover of baseball, and he would pitch all day, all the time we were out, and we would play work-up. I imagine everybody understands what work-up is. You batted till you got put out, and then you went to the end of the line. And he just never got tired. He just did that all the time. And he was a really good teacher, but he didn't have any discipline problems, because the very first day of the year, if somebody acted out, he swatted them and slapped them, and he never had any trouble after that. But by the springtime, I'd kind of got used to his ways, and one day I got sent home because I wouldn't stop talking. He kept saying to stop, and I just kept chattering on, and so he said, well, maybe you better go home. So I went home, and I didn't know for sure whether I was supposed to come back the next day or not, but my dad took me back the next day. In high school, I had an office, class, in our class office or in the student body, and I liked to be in the plays that we had. I really enjoyed that, and I was a pretty good student, not brilliant, but a pretty good student most of the time. In high school, my favorite teacher was Mrs. Evans. Yes, Mrs. Evans, and she taught math and speech and typing, and I loved typing and speech. I was really glad that I'd taken speech, because I in later years needed to make a few speeches at different things, so it was good that I kind of knew how to do it. Mr. Spencer was the superintendent and also a teacher. I liked him, and I also especially liked Mrs. Billingsley. She was a thoughtful, caring teacher, and I really liked all my teachers. I can't say that there was any of them that I didn't like. All the way through school, I pretty much liked the teachers. My best friend was Lois Meekum Stocking. She was my friend even before we went to school. She lived across the street from where we lived when we were quite young, and she was my best friend. My class was a big class, but it was mostly boys. We had 15 boys and 6 girls in our class when we graduated. and Twyla Meekum Adamson and Lois Diggerly were really good friends. And when Nettie Smith Baird moved to town, why, she was a good friend too. And we fought and argued with the boys, but we didn't win too often. Most of the time when we were out of school, when we were young, we kind of congregated at our house. I'm from a big family, and everybody had friends, and so after Sunday school on Sunday, we always played games, and the games were called Stink Pot and Run My Sheepy Run and Red Rover and May I. And it would take too long to explain how you play them, but they were games that were running, and you tagged people. And we played that a lot. We played softball, and my folks always saw that we had books to read in the evening. We hadn't, of course, it wasn't any television then, so I read a lot in the evening. I read every book I could get a hold of, and my folks saw that we had a lot of books, so that was pretty good. That was mostly what we did. In high school, I worked at my grandfather Peterson's store, grocery store, and when I graduated from high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My aptitude test thought I should be either a school teacher or take up acting, and I didn't want to be a school teacher, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And after I was out of school, I started working at the telephone office. I worked for a short time at the post office around Christmas time that year too, but I worked at the telephone office for about a year before I got married. Well, Jim and I got married in 1950, and we had this 80 acres of ground where my house is now, and it was covered with sagebrush, and we cleared the sagebrush off and planted it, and we did pretty good, and we built a house. We had 3 kids, Jim, Carl, and Carol, and then we bought more land, and after a while, we got some cattle and some sheep, and we ran a sheep outfit for a long, long time. And we took, for about 20 years, well, I drove the school bus too. I drove it for about 20 years. I think you must have rode on it when you were first grade, maybe. But anyway, I helped as much as I could with the farm and the livestock. I didn't milk any cows. I wouldn't do that, but I did most everything else. And along towards, in the 80s, we decided to go to Blythe, to take the sheep to Blythe to lamb them out. And the Centerooses talked, Jim kept telling him how good it was down there. So we started taking our sheep to Blythe to lamb them on the alfalfa fields, and that worked really good for us. So we did that for a long time, and for about 20 years. And then we got a chance to sell the sheep. So in about 2001 or so, we sold our sheep outfit and kind of retired. So that's pretty much life. But through the years, I've done a lot of volunteering. I mean, as quick as the kids were in school, well, before that, I worked a little bit in the church. And then when the kids were in school, I was a room mother. I was in the PTA and the Cub Scouts, and I belonged to the Progressive Club for at least 60 years, and I was president and secretary and treasurer of the American Legion Auxiliary, and for 8 or 9 years I was president or make-it-yourself wool director of the state Idaho Wool Growers Association Auxiliary, and I went to the national convention and meetings in 10 different states, so I traveled a little bit. Jim usually went with me to the conventions. I went by myself to the meetings, but he usually went to the conventions with me. And even in Blythe, I was a docent at the museum. You know, nothing to do, so just as well help somebody if I could. So I also helped gather up signatures when they wanted to start the recreation district. I gathered up signatures so it could get put on the election ballot. Well, I was confident, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I really wasn't worried about it. I figured I'd manage to figure out something before too long, and back then, we didn't have all these guidance counselors and things that they have now, so we had very little assistance to help us realize what we might want to do. But like I say, I was not prepared, but I was not worried either. So When we have something really bad happen, we think that we just can't handle it. We just can't do it. But if you just knuckle down and decide that you can do it, things will get better. Not very soon, probably, but they will get better. And life will go on, and you will be all right if you just don't give up. I think the best advice I could give the Carey schools is to do their best in whatever they decide to do, to be honest and truthful, and whatever you end up doing, do it as well as you can do, but along the way, enjoy your life. Well, I'm proud, of course everybody says this, I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of the fact that I have never voted against anything for the school. And I'm proud that I think I have been able to help a few people along the way, maybe a little bit. I think when I've done the volunteer work that it's helped a lot of people, and I've enjoyed it all. It's great. I really have enjoyed. My life has been great. Jim and I were also the Grand Marshals of the 24th of July parade, and I was the Heritage Court lady that I was elected or nominated for by the 4-H Council. So it's quite an honor, and I was happy to have that. I was proud of that. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of traveling. Quite a bit of traveling. Jim and I took our grandkids to Disneyland and San Diego on the train from Salt Lake, 2 at a time. I have 6 grandsons. Anyway, we did that. We took our kids, Jim and Deb and Carol and Greg, to Jamaica for a week's vacation. I've been to Washington, D.C. a couple of times. And I went with Bill and Susie, my brother and Jim's sister, to Boston and drove north to Portland, Maine to a meeting that Bill was going to. And Jim and I took a week's train trip through Canada. We've been to New Zealand and Australia. And last summer, my kids, Jim and Deb and Carol and I, went to Scotland and England and spent about 2 weeks. So, but on all these places I've gone to, I've never found a place that I wanted to live more than in Carey. So, and when we went to Australia and New Zealand, it was kind of a fishing thing. We wanted to go, of course, but we were kind of looking around thinking what it might be like to live there. But it's nice, but it's not home. My mother and father, Merle Patterson Carlson and Leonard Briggs Carlson. My brothers and sisters, Valine, Leonard Jr., Joe, Bella, and Bill. My 3 kids, Jim, Carl, and Carol, and my 4 Peterson grandkids, Courtney, Colby, Buddy, and Alex, have all graduated from the Carey High School. My husband also graduated, and I, Mary Peterson, graduated from the Carey High School too.